To hear this and many more audiobooks not available on YouTube in a podcast feed, please visit the first link in the description below, and thank you for your support. America Against America by Wang Huning. Chapter 4. Multi-Level Social Regulation. Part 1. The Invisible Hand. Western economies and societies operate on the principle of the invisible hand, i.e., the economic lever, the market, regulates economic movement. Since Adam Smith proposed the economic principle of liberalism, despite the rise of Keynesianism and the welfare state, the principle of liberalism has remained the basic principle of the functioning of Western economies and societies. The invisible hand was once transformed into the visible hand, i.e., direct governmental control over the entire economic and social process, and now, Western governments are regulating economic behavior much more than before. However, Western societies are still dominated by the coordination of the invisible hand. Both the invisible hand and the visible hand are related to the behavior of the government. Which approach is used determines the size of the government's function and burden. Generally speaking, the invisible hand reduces the burden of government, while the visible hand increases it. In modern societies, politics and economics are so intertwined that changing the way the economy is regulated means changing the structure and function of the political and administrative system. The invisible hand means that the political and administrative system does indirect control of the economy and society only in the areas of taxation, finance, law, etc. The specific economic operations of individual enterprises, however, are left to each enterprise to do its thing in the sea of the market economy. This gives rise to extensive competition. To win in an economy, to win big, a company must be good at competing, must be good at winning markets and customers from other similar companies, or it will go down the drain. They have no government agency to rely on, and the structure of government is all different from the structure of the economy in terms of laws and determining procedures that are difficult to cut through. If they do not compete well and do not operate well, they will go out of business and go bankrupt. This type of situation can happen within a business, i.e., something goes wrong with the internal operation of the business, or outside a business, i.e., other businesses are good at business, good at management, and the environment changes. To be invincible, any enterprise has to be unique and improve continuously. The most important competition lies in the quality of service. Whether it is products, services, tangible or intangible, ultimately can be attributed to the quality of the service. Without service quality, there will be no customers, there will be no market, there will be no profit, and they will be eliminated. This is an irresistible force that drives every enterprise to continuously improve service quality and compete for the market. In this economic model, the government is not inactive. The government uses legal, financial, and taxation instruments to regulate economic behavior. However, the government is not directly involved in the economic process. Government regulates at 3 stages: when a business starts, when it operates, and when it closes. Regulation is not management, and it is probably fair to say that regulation determines what to do and what not to do in this society, and management determines what can and should be done in this society. Of course, this is only a very abstract argument. The duty of the political and administrative system is not to teach companies what to do, but to control them so they do not get out of hand and to guide them in the general direction of social development. This is not to say that this coordination mechanism is perfect. Since the invisible hand plays a leading role, there are many areas where the political and administrative system cannot intervene or can hardly intervene. Sometimes, the political and administrative system can also be used to avoid responsibility and stand aside. To illustrate the role of the invisible hand, here is an example of competition among travel agencies in San Francisco's Chinatown. I am afraid it is difficult to say how many travel agencies there are in San Francisco's Chinatown, but there are probably dozens of them. If you walk around San Francisco's Chinatown, you will see the signs of travel agencies. When you open the local Chinese newspaper, advertisements for travel agencies abound. Most of these travel agencies are owned by ethnic Chinese, and their general services include group tours, buying air tickets, gifts, and bills abroad, and Chinese transportation services. Since the travel agencies offer roughly the same services, there is fierce competition among them for the market and for customers. We can usually name some travel agencies, such as Panway Travel, And Transport, Li Da Travel, Wai Ya Travel, Your Travel, Soon Wind Travel, Cathay Travel, Gold Mountain Travel, Li Shan Travel Consultants, Fei Fei Travel Company, Jet Airways, Swire Express, East Wind, Seven Seas Travel, Flight and Boat Travel, Reed Travel, Wing On Travel, Envoy Travel, and so on. This is only a small portion of them, and only the travel agencies located in Chinatown, which basically specialize in serving the Chinese and overseas Chinese. Add the travel agencies outside of Chinatown, and you can imagine the fierce competition. Such travel companies handle worldwide travel programs to Europe, Asia, Latin America, but also for domestic travel projects. Due to the competition, each of them has to have new and high-level tricks in terms of services, including special cheap air tickets, route design, hotel agency, car rental, etc. In terms of airfare, the prices vary. For example, from San Francisco International Airport to Japan and then to Shanghai. Some travel agencies offer $480, some offer $460, some offer $440. This price competition naturally prompted the travel agencies to try to set prices within a reasonable range. Otherwise, they will lose the market. To quote low prices also involves the entire business management. If the price is low, no profit. The business will naturally collapse. Therefore, the competition between them is not only the competition of price, but also the competition of management ability, human quality, and business style. This competition reflects the general characteristics of enterprise competition under the control of the invisible hand. In terms of service, due to competition, travel agencies have to try to improve the quality of service as well. I booked a ticket from San Francisco to Shanghai with a travel agency here. After I called and asked for a price, the travel agent booked the ticket for me by computer. A few days later, I went to pick up my ticket. Everything was arranged. I was asked if I needed to change the date and flight, and if I didn't need to change, the ticket was issued. After I picked up the tickets on the spot, the agent also told me that I had to confirm my international ticket 72 hours before departure, and she said that the travel agency would handle the departure from San Francisco, and that I should not forget the travel agency after I arrived in Japan. She also took out the form for a Japanese visa and gave it to me, which is a kind of incidental service. I said I did not know anything about doing a Japanese visa. She immediately called the visa office of the Consulate General of Japan in San Francisco and asked for information. After a few days, Travel Do called to tell me that the flight from Tokyo to Shanghai was canceled and asked me what day I would like to leave instead. Very responsible to the customer. Another professor in our department was also outbound in San Francisco, and he was going to Japan, Hong Kong, and Singapore. It was a little more trouble to buy the tickets because it was necessary to connect all these places and also involved visa time in one place and so on. Finally, a travel agency was selected and they issued the tickets. They calculated carefully, gave the lowest price, and helped with the visa process to get a Hong Kong visa to go to Los Angeles. It was not convenient to go on your own, and given to do it on your behalf, various travel agencies in terms of service, customers have any requirements, they try to meet it, and often take the initiative for the sake of customers. Why is there such a service quality? The reason is very simple. High service quality is prosperous. Low service quality is death. In a society full of competition, an enterprise can only survive so long. However, the role of the invisible hand at play is powerful, but it also has to have certain conditions. The abundance of resources is an important condition. If there are so many travel agencies but not so many airlines, airline tickets cannot be bought. The airlines can have a monopoly price without asking travel agencies to help them promote. If there is also competition among airlines, then travel agencies will have a source of tickets. The same is true for the economy of society as a whole. Because the whole economy is competitive economy, all the links are in competition and the invisible hand can work. If the macro environment is not competitive, several enterprises will not be able to compete. The invisible hand grows too small, the visible hand too large. A competitive economy is developed gradually and cannot be achieved overnight. It took hundreds of years for American society to develop this mechanism. The formation of this set of mechanisms has important implications for the political and administrative system. This is that it can be greatly freed from the heavy burden of specific management. The vast majority of society's transportation, communication, daily commodities, real estate, and food are managed by private enterprises in competition. The role of the government is indirect management, in which the invisible hand reduces the burden of the government and the visible hand increases it. The invisible hand also has its shortcomings because of this invisibility, so we do not know where the hand is. Often when things have reached a certain stage, it dawns on people that the hand is there. By this time, the economy and the functioning of society may have already developed more important problems. The development of Western societies, especially after the Second World War, can be a strong example of this cycle. What we want to observe is not the economic behavior, but how the political and administrative systems are constrained under different economic models. In the invisible hand model, the political locomotive is not attached to the long train of the economy, and the economy has an economic locomotive. The advantage is that both have a lighter load and may run faster. The disadvantage is that since there are two locomotives, it is difficult to control and harmonize them with each other. Under the visible hand model, the political locomotive is attached to a long series of economic cars. The disadvantage is that it is heavily loaded and not easy to move quickly. The advantage is that it may be easy to move in a regular direction because it is the same locomotive. Politics is not included here. From a political point of view, the conclusion may be different again. The politics of any society cannot be examined in isolation from its economic model. The same is true for any specific political behavior. The structure and nature of American social politics cannot be explained outside of its economic model. Part 2. Money Management Society. In a typical capitalist society like the United States, the phrase "money makes the world go round" is perfectly applicable, to which can be added "money makes the goods go round." In American society, there is, indeed, a tangible feeling. Greenbacks, because the dollar is green, hit the world. The development of the commodity economy has made everyone equal in front of money, and money can buy anything that can be bought with no delineated boundaries. Money is the tangible driving force behind the development of capitalist society, and the pursuit of money drives economic and social development. Americans do a lot of things with the first goal of earning money. Professors teach mostly without the inner impulse of worrying about the country and the people, which is a kind of work. Politicians are hardly idealists, serving in political party campaigns also for the purpose of money, and so on and so forth. For in any society where money is the symbol of value, there is no livelihood without it. To some extent, American society is organized around money. Acknowledging this fact reveals a wonderful phenomenon that I call money governs society. Money becomes a fundamental medium in the management of society. People manage money, and at the same time they use money to manage people. A set of mechanisms centered on money constitutes an important mechanism in the management of American society. People serve money. Because of the importance of money, people have tried to invent mechanisms, methods, and techniques to manage it. As a result, a huge management system is formed through the medium of money. It is precisely this system that capital uses for the purpose of obtaining surplus value. This system is independent of the government, independent of the political system, and does not require direct control by the political system. It undertakes a large and complex management process by itself. Marx said that under the capitalist system, the commodity economy is apparently a relationship between things, but in fact it is a relationship between people. This is a most famous saying, and it applies to any relationship between people that takes the form of material relations. When people manage money, they actually manage people. This non-governmental money mechanism regulates people's thinking, emotions, and behavior. The process of using money in a capitalist society is extremely convenient for the individual, although not in terms of the management process. Banks are the primary sector of management. There are many different types of banks. State banks are generally more powerful. Banks perform various social management functions. Each hiring unit pays wages and allocates them directly to each employee's account at the bank and does not hand large bodies of money to individuals, who then go to the bank to withdraw the money. The bank is directly escrowed. Carrying a large sum of money on your person is not safe and inconvenient. It is obviously inconvenient to carry a purse of money to buy a color TV or a refrigerator. Checks are something that is commonly used in the United States or in Western societies. Banks have various types of checks to choose from. After depositing money, the check has the name and address of the holder printed on it. All this process can be settled within 2 weeks, and in principle checks are available in the United States and most places in the world. The bearer simply writes who to pay how much and signs and gives it to the store or hotel. The person who receives the check transfers it through the bank, which automatically takes that amount from the account of the person who wrote it. Once a month, the bank reports to the depositor in writing and sends the check that the bank received signed by the depositor. The depositor does not have to worry about the cash himself. Naturally, if a check is lost, that becomes a problem because the check can be used by anyone but for the signature. Also, there are people who have no deposits in the bank, have used them up, and are still using the checks. To be on the safe side, sometimes the party receiving the check has to see ID or take down a phone number. In terms of travel, you can also use traveler's checks. Traveler's checks are useless if they are not signed. Naturally, losing them is also a problem and they have to be reported lost. Another service of the bank is the money withdrawal card. It is a plastic card with a magnetic strip on the back. With this card, you can withdraw cash from an automatic machine. Each card holder has a PIN number that he or she enters into the machine, which is computerized and it automatically recognizes it and gives the customer the amount of cash he or she needs. Most of these machines are local, but there are also national ones. These machines can also make deposits. Just give your password, put the amount you want to deposit into the envelope available next to the machine, and put it into the deposit slot. In addition to these, credit cards are very popular in Western societies. With a credit card, you can use it in most countries. Many stores or hotels in China also accept credit cards. Credit cards require an application. A credit card is a plastic card with the number and name of the holder on it. To use this card anywhere, the conditional card holder places the card on a special computerized device, and a screen shows whether the card holder's card is acceptable, whether such a card is lost, whether there is credit, etc. Then, the card and the bill for the payment in question are placed together, pressed on a special device that prints the card number and name on the bill, and the customer is asked to sign. In this way, the customer does not have to pay cash, and each month the credit company sends the bill to the cardholder. The cardholder has to pay the bill to the company at a certain time. There are many of these cards. The more famous ones are Visa, MasterCard, American Express, Discover, and so on. There are also different levels of cards, mainly for the total amount of goods that can be purchased at one time, such as $1,500 or more. Credit cards are indeed very convenient, but at the same time, all credit card holders are regulated by the card issuer. Cardholders pay their bills to the credit card company by writing a check and sending it from home, and many things are done through the post office and by check. Pay taxes to the government, send a check. Place an order, send a check. You can send a check and a film to develop a photo. You can send a check to pay back money you borrowed from someone, and the banks of the parties involved will deal with you directly. The management of money is also reflected in borrowing. Banks lend money to businesses and individuals. Businesses borrow as capital for investment, which also exists in socialist countries. Naturally, enterprises are private businesses and receive a kind of personal loan, but this part of the loan goes to in its capital investments. There are also purely personal loans, such as those used to buy a house, a car, etc., which can be taken from a bank. The personal loan has to be repaid partly every month along with the interest due. The interest the bank receives does not come only from the business, but also from the individual. This is different from China. As a result of the loan, the individual is connected to the bank. If the loan is not repaid, the bank has the right to take the lender's property as an offset, backed up by the police department. There is also an organized system of management in the relationship of borrowing and owing money outside of banks. For example, if you have seen a doctor in a hospital, you spend a lot of money and have no money to pay for medical treatment. The hospital then turns this matter over to a specialized debt collection agency. The debt collection agency's duty is to collect debts and is well versed in the law and specializes in this field. It will make a plan for the debtor to pay the money every month, and if not, it will go to court. Banks offer all kinds of facilities and also have a system of strict control. Anyone who wants to get this convenience has to accept this control system. If you apply for a credit card, you have to fill out an application form. On the application form, the name, date of birth, social security number, address, home telephone number, length of residence in the local area, whether the home is owned or borrowed, previous home address, length of residence, closest relatives and friends living separately, address, mother's name when she was unmarried, name of employer or company, nature of employment status, length of residence, address, telephone number, former employer or company, must be stated within 3 years, the yearly salary, other income, source of other income, verification of the name used, telephone number, bank deposit number, bank name, bank address, etc. The card issue has to verify all this information before issuing the card to the applicant, so you can see how people can start from managing money and develop to managing people. These data will become a personal file and a very detailed one at that. Applications for loans, etc. all have to go through this process. There are also companies that specialize in managing the creditworthiness of individuals. These companies are called credit reporting companies. These companies are privately owned, regulated by law, and actually collect personal crotch cases, mainly in economic and not political terms. There are many of these companies, both national and local. Every person who has dealt with a bank or financial institution has a name on file. Banks and various financial institutions can ask such companies about their customers. If you apply for a loan, the bank can check the situation, such as past bill payments, credit, etc., using its own computer terminal. If the credit is bad, the bank will refuse the loan. This is a very powerful network. Banks have a partnership with such companies where the bank proactively reports the customer's situation to them, and the credit reporting company in turn reduces the bank's charges for using the information. This mechanism powerfully manages the people who want to deal with money or cannot do without it, so to speak. All the people in the world today are in the bag. Naturally, if one has good credit, one can enjoy all the above facilities. This mechanism regulates everyone's behavior, and if one is excluded from all the above mechanisms, one will encounter all kinds of checks. What are the conveniences? Look at what American Express offers beyond money. More than 1,400 travel offices in 1,000 cities around the world to help with travel planning, emergencies, and more. This shows how effectively and powerfully capital controls society at large, and thus society as a whole. Most of the institutions in this set are private, but in fact they manage a very large part of the affairs of the whole society. This management is not based on coercion and command, but rather on voluntarily by each individual. People, either voluntarily or driven by social circumstances, automatically seek to be governed. Americans like to be governed least, but they like money most. The logic of money is to lead people to be governed. This mechanism is related to the basic survival of each person and therefore effective management. Perhaps mobilizing the ability of a society's money to govern people is a very important aspect of reducing the pressure on the political system to manage. The amazing dynamism of money connects individuals to individuals and institutions to institutions. The government transcends this set of mechanisms and controls them indirectly by legal means. The people in this mechanism, all operating in their own interests, maintain the balance of this set of mechanisms. I am afraid that if it were only a deposit relationship, a management mechanism would not have developed. The key question is the extent to which money has developed into a set of institutions on which people must depend. Americans believe in freedom and do not rely on other institutions, but they rely on this one. A society cannot be effectively managed without a system of subject management on which everyone depends. Societies have different subject systems at different stages of development, and in a fully developed economy, there may have to be a transition from a political to an economic system. Part 3. Standardization of people. Standardization is necessary in modern society. American society has reached a certain level in this regard. It can be found that there are defined criteria for all kinds of matters and all kinds of work. In particular, there are standardized evaluation procedures for the selection of personnel or for the evaluation of people's knowledge and skills. The U.S. is a highly mobile society where people do not have fixed accounts or work records and may have different levels of education and systems. How do you determine if a person meets certain requirements or if they can do a certain job? A very important procedure is for individuals to pass standardized exams. Employers often rely on these test scores to determine whether to hire or not hire an individual, and schools rely on these tests to determine whether to admit or not admit students. Chinese students are familiar with the TOEFL or GRE as these tests. Such exams are often not specifically administered by the government, but by private specialized companies. The government may commission these companies to design special exam papers or specify what exams must be passed in order to hold a position, and no one can hold the position without passing a specified exam. For example, lawyers are required to pass a specified examination. Such companies are responsible for organizing, designing, analyzing, and administering the exams. From the point of view of social management, they assume a very important function in the functioning of society. I visited one such company and spoke with Richard L. Ferguson, the chief executive. ACT is an independent not-for-profit organization that provides a variety of services to students' parents, high schools, and colleges, as well as to professional organizations and government agencies. ACT also developed a variety of other programs in education, student admissions, vocational education, and licensure. ACT is headquartered in Iowa City and has offices in Washington, D.C., California, Denver, Atlanta, Austin, and Albany. Each office is responsible for several states, thus forming a national network. ACT's governing body has two components: the ACT Corporation, composed of representatives elected by the states, which meets annually to review policy, and the Board of Directors, a 15-member board that meets quarterly to review the administration of the ACT. The Board of Directors appoints the chief executive, who is the principal executive officer of ACT. ACT's business includes many aspects, and we can look at several. ACT Evaluation Program. This is a comprehensive program that serves college, high school, and college-bound students. Students take an ACT-designed test that includes educational and autobiographical questionnaires. 4 exams: English, mathematics, social studies, and a natural science, and an interest inventory. After ACT analyzes the test papers, it prepares a report on them for use by students, high schools, and colleges. It can be used for career selection, curriculum design, student admissions, etc. Approximately 1 million middle and high school students take the ACT each year. Test results are used by 2,900 universities, colleges, academic institutions, or state education systems. This means that admissions tests, such as the college admissions test, are not organized by the government but by the ACT, a private national corporation, but each institution recognizes the authority of the test. Educational Opportunity Service, ACT, uses computers to analyze information about students who take the test, including educational plans, interests, strengths, and educational goals. Enrollment Information Service, EIS. This service consists of 2 basic components: a market analysis service and a revenue analysis service. These 2 services are based on the data obtained from the aforementioned examinations. The Industry Testing Program, ACT, has more than 40 standardized exams designed to allow those with no professional training to earn a professional certificate that demonstrates that they have reached a post-secondary level in practical work or independent study. The exams include the arts, sciences, business, education, and nursing, among other fields. Participating institutions award certificates, design curricula, etc. based on the results of the exams. ACT offers many other types of services, including career planning, computer analysis of data, and financial analysis. Another important activity is the provision of services to professional organizations. In society, all types of professional or vocational organizations are non-governmental. In order for professional organizations to exist in society and be trusted, they must be of high quality and at a high level, otherwise they will not be very useful. Therefore, although professional organizations are not required to conduct examinations of their members, they themselves organize examinations of their own members. ACT provides this service to about 80 such organizations, including unions and government agencies. This type of examination is primarily to evaluate a person's level and qualifications for a scholarship, certificate, or license, or for admission to further professional training in a program, and one can look at which associations are associated with ACT. American Academy of Ophthalmology, American Academy of Otolaryngology, American Association of Business Schools, American Society of Teachers of German, American Society for Microbiology, American Council on Education, American Dental Association, the Association of American Medical Colleges, Emergency Nursing Association, Law School Admissions Committee, National Association of Pharmacology, U.S. Department of Defense, etc. Companies like ACT and several others are large national companies. There is also competition among these companies, and they have to survive as well as get a reputation and quality. The companies put a lot of effort into researching how to improve and refine the exams and papers, how to better evaluate the test takers, and how to determine the appropriate standards. At the same time, they are responsible for maintaining confidentiality and not letting the exam questions and papers leak out because the credibility of the company is at stake. If you falsify the test, the whole company may collapse because you will lose business. If they lose business, the companies cannot survive because they are private companies. Although non-profit, salaries and administrative costs are derived from these business activities. ACT, for example, has a full-time and hourly staff of nearly 500. That is a large expense based on U.S. wages. The government is not responsible for the company's expenses because there is no connection. As you can see, the existence of such companies is related to the demand for standardization in society. If society did not require standardization, such companies would not exist. Modern society is at the same time a standardized society. In terms of standardization, such companies benefit from two things: government regulations that specify which exams must be passed by which company for which type of activity or profession, and non-governmental organizations such as schools and associations. Anyone who wants to practice a profession or enter a school or an institution cannot do so without passing the necessary exams. This approach, on the one hand, saves the government a great deal of money by eliminating the need to set up a special department to conduct such examinations, while the private sector maintains the standardized procedures in society through fees. On the other hand, a standardized process is achieved. The government has the full freedom to require that a particular occupation pass a particular exam from a particular company or a particular exam from another company if it feels that the former company does not meet quality and standards. Other organizations have the same right to do so, and all have to maintain their credibility and trustworthiness, thus reaching a kind of check and balance. Naturally, another important condition is that there is a need for general standardization in society. If such an atmosphere does not develop in society, it will be difficult for such private companies to survive. Such an atmosphere can be formed only when every cell of society is organized with a real concern for its own interests and survival. If every cell has no sense of interest, has something to rely on and depend on, and is not responsible for being good or bad, there will be no such atmosphere. Only when the admission of each person is closely related to their own interests will people pursue standardization. Another driving force for standardization is the widespread mobility of people. Society is so mobile that everyone needs to be validated in their skills and knowledge, and every institution needs to have reliable credentials to prove each individual's skills and knowledge. Local credentials are no longer sufficient to meet this requirement. Too comprehensive a certificate, such as a university diploma, is not enough to prove competence in the profession. The wide mobility of people requires that everyone who wants to get a certain position effectively prove their knowledge and ability. To obtain such proof, people have to meet socially accepted standards. This mutual process drives the standardization of people. Certificates are product instructions and certificates of conformity for all types of people. People buy goods in the market and shop for them according to their use, performance, and size. When the development of human resources reaches a certain level, the standardization of people will then become an essential part of society. Part 4. Regulatory culture. Any society needs certain regulations to regulate the relationship between people. Regardless of the type of society, the system is different, the culture is different, the regulations of regulations are essential. There can be various levels of regulations. The Constitution is the highest level, the law is another level, and specific regulations are another level. Regulation is a tool that people can use to resolve conflicts and contradictions. Naturally, the status of regulations varies in different cultures, and the regulatory role they play varies, as well as the form in which they are expressed in different societies, some in the form of written laws, some in the form of traditional taboos, and some in the form of religious precepts. American society is a regulatory society with a plethora of regulations, and every area of social life is defined by certain regulations. It is worth exploring why such a regulatory culture has developed. Let us first look at specific aspects of the regulatory culture of society. A few examples illustrate these issues. The greatest statute in the United States is the Constitution. In this society, the Constitution is a central part of the culture, not just a central part of politics and law. I remember once, a professor came to Fudan University to give a lecture, and a Chinese student asked a question. There is no fixed ideology in the United States. What do people unify their thoughts based on? This was a very typical Chinese question, and the professor was puzzled. After explaining, he understood what the student wanted to ask. He thought for a while and then said, "The Constitution." The answer seemed to be a windy one. The Constitution is a law, not an ideology. Ideologies do not have the force of law, but the answer does reflect the customary American response. The Constitution is culture, not just law. The Constitution profoundly embodies the dominant ideology of the West, and it turns it into law. The Constitution has been deeply imprinted on people's hearts and minds for more than 200 years and has become the final arbiter of social disputes. Not everyone thinks of the Constitution all the time, but when a dispute arises, the only thing everyone can rely on is that they feel they can trust is the Constitution. See Chapter 2, Section 5, 2 centuries of the Constitution. The Constitution is too abstract a statute, and there are thousands of specific statutes that regulate people's behavior on a daily basis. I personally feel that most people in Eastern societies and Eastern cultures may find these regulations too harsh. People who grow up in Eastern culture, if they really live in American society, sometimes do not feel comfortable and free. Alcohol. There are strict regulations to control. People who are underage cannot drink alcohol, and drinking alcohol is a violation of the law. Stores must obtain a government license to sell alcohol, and no store or restaurant is allowed to sell alcohol without a license. Iowa City's supermarkets do not sell alcohol on Sunday mornings before 12 p.m. on the grounds that people are expected to be at church or mass at that time. Of course, this is not the intention of the government, but a religious influence and a tradition. Food products, too, are regulated by strict regulations. For example, the maximum standards for chemical elements in fruits and vegetables, and the marketing standards for meat. If the relevant regulations are exceeded, the food cannot be marketed, and if the regulations are violated, there will be severe penalties. Large fines are imposed. Cars. There are so many that it's amazing how many there are. Basically one for every family, and many families have two. How to manage cars has become a major problem for society. Strict regulations have been established to regulate car behavior. Traffic rules were very strict. Everyone who wants to get a driver's license must pass a special test. At high speed, people must also comply with these rules. Otherwise, it is not impossible for a car to destroy people. Gridlock traffic is a headache. Parking is a big problem. On both sides of the street, there are clear signs indicating whether you can park. If you park in a place where you can't park, you will receive a fine, a ticket, and if you don't pay, you will be notified by the court to appear in court or have trouble renewing your license next time. Freeways, called highways, also have strict rules about how fast cars can drive, usually between 50 and 65 miles per hour. There are police patrols on the highway, and cars found speeding are subject to fines of several dozen dollars, which is a typical amount. Sitting or driving in a car, the person in the front must wear a seatbelt. If you do not wear a seatbelt, you are also in violation of the law. In this regard, the laws of each state are not exactly the same. Some stipulate that while driving on the highway, one must wear a seatbelt. Some stipulate that while driving on city streets, one must also wear one. In terms of taxation, I am afraid that there are the most detailed regulations, probably because it is related to the government's revenue. Government tax regulations are so detailed that the average person would have to study them for a long time. There are rules for every detailed aspect. If you violate these rules, you can be punished very severely. Therefore, everyone has to be careful when dealing with government taxes. If you don't pay or can't pay your property taxes, the government has the right to take that part of your property and sell it against your taxes. Anyone has to report income to the government. In this respect, Americans are the least free. See Chapter 4, Section 5, the tax system, and Chapter 7, Section 6, transparent deliberation. Schooling, too, has strict rules for admission, exams, tuition, credits, jobs for teaching assistants, health, insurance, and everything else. These regulations regulate the activities of the school. It is entirely possible for these regulations to keep students who violate them out of school. Factories, government agencies, schools, military agencies, and other fields have their own detailed regulations. By human nature, people do not want to obey the rules and regulations. They want to live freely and unrestrained. But regulations are mandatory and people should or must comply with them. There are special places in parking lots for people with disabilities that people don't normally use. Street-side parking places sometimes have automatic toll timing devices, and most people will automatically put coins in and keep track of their time. Traffic rules are also obeyed by everyone, even if there are no cars. People will not cross the street until the light indicating that they can cross the street is on. People do not smoke in places where it is written, "Do not smoke." Buses are generally unmanned, and coins are automatically thrown into a device, and at the end of the line, when the driver is sometimes not on board, passengers generally throw in their coins. This is especially true for the law. Why does this happen? The famous scholar H.S. Commager says that to ask an American to obey a certain rule is an insult and a challenge to him. That is what I said about the incompatibility between the requirements of human nature and compliance. But he adds that Americans have a peculiar attitude toward the law. At first glance, it seems that Americans do not obey the law, and everyone is guilty of minor infractions, though Americans are reverent of the law. Commager's explanation is that Americans believe that the American nation thrives on contempt for tradition and authority, with regulations representing tradition and discipline representing authority. But the government and the Constitution are valid and cannot tolerate attacks and disobedient, as the development of society proves. That's why people revere the law, and most of the exhaustive regulations of modern society are adopted by the legislature. Many of the aforementioned regulations, which have a legal form, in a way, harmonize the sense of anti-regulation and the sense of following the law. American society can be described as a regulatory society, although the phenomenon of lawlessness and crime is quite worrying. However, the whole process of society is regulated by various regulations. There must be a reason why the law works the way it does. Naturally, I cannot say what the reason must be, but in addition to the analysis of Kang Ma-ji, I can think again. It is a fact that the United States is a young society that has not historically developed a complex social class structure, unlike European and Eastern societies. European and Eastern societies have a long history in which tradition and non-tradition, authority and non-authority have been personified. Some groups represent tradition, and some represent authority. These groups, or classes, occupy a certain position in society and assume the function of coordinating interpersonal behavior when social conflicts and conflicts of interest develop. In societies with a long history and culture, the coordinating factor is the humanization of groups with culture, power, wealth, or tradition in society. In this cultural climate, regulations cannot play a dominant role, As long as this interpersonal structure or humanized coordination mechanism does not change, it is difficult for regulations to be effective. In contrast, when the United States emerged on the stage of history as a new nation, there was no strong humanized coordinating mechanism. A society, in turn, must have coordination mechanisms. That is why the common set of rules and regulations had a stronger position. Everyone's interests are protected by the law, and there is no humanized coordination. This is the basis of the regulatory society of the United States. Needless to say, on this basis, regulations have developed, and there are differences in interest orientation, and it is not possible to protect every member of a society equally. The role of cultural mechanisms resulting from historical development in the formation of a regulatory society is only emphasized here. Another important reason is the rapid advancement of technology after World War II. I think this has also contributed to the regulation of society. The development of high technology, especially the results of bringing high technology into the homes of ordinary people, so that people must comply with the necessary rules, because without rules, not only can one not enjoy high technology, but it also may be dangerous. Such as cars are becoming faster and faster. Without strict rules, this will be life-threatening. As highways are ever more developed, those who do not abide by the rules may not be able to travel. Television, VCR, video cameras, washing machines, rice cookers, microwave ovens, audio equipment, vacuum cleaners, weeders, egg beaters, slicers, envelope openers, can openers, massagers, electric toothbrushes, shavers, video games, etc. Simple tools require a much more complex set of rules. In technology, modern devices, such as computers, laser typewriters, faxes, and photocopiers, refuse to work if their users do not obey the rules. In public places, automatic telephones, newspaper machines, vending machines, automatic cameras, automatic money changers, automatic stamp machines, automatic money deposit, and withdrawal machines all require compliance with the rules, and so on and so forth, under many different names. If the rules are not followed, the machines refuse to work. In the operation of society, checks, credit cards, loans, stocks, etc., there are also detailed rules. Americans grow up in such an environment, in a kind of social coercion, to follow the rules. To enter this society, you have to follow the rules. This is not only a way of life, but also has become a culture. People get into the habit of following the rules. There is an interesting comparison. Americans cooked food, strictly according to the recipe, strict measurements of various condiments, with a variety of measuring tools, a minute, and do not want to differ. Chinese people cooking rarely look at the recipe, grab a handful. The progress of science and technology in American society, the development of more and more specialized supplies, requires each person who wants to use them to comply with the rules. Naturally, compliance with rules may or may not be beneficial for social development, depending on the historical conditions. However, if one is in a society where there are disputes and groups living together, one always needs mechanisms to reconcile conflicts. The coordination of commonly set regulations may be imperfect, but it is the one most likely to be followed. The effectiveness of regulatory harmonization will be greatly expanded if it is combined with the rationalization principles of technology. Ordinary people do not directly accept high technological logics. They become a subtle force only after they have penetrated into the life of society. Part 5. Tax system. The U.S. tax system is an extraordinarily complex system that is not easy to figure out. Many Americans don't quite understand it either. One political science professor told me that he once couldn't understand a government tax document and called the department and said, "I have a PhD in political science and I still can't quite understand your documents." Taxes are a major political issue. One of the main debates in the presidential election was whether to raise or lower taxes. The newspapers say Bush has successfully convinced many voters that Dukakis's policies will raise taxes. So, Bush is ahead in the polls. The tax issue is about how the government spends the people's money. So voters are most concerned. In fact, taxes were the foundation of the United States, as one of the major causes of the War of Independence was the rebellion against the British government's heavy taxation of the then 13 North American states. In modern countries, taxation is never an economic issue, but a political one. Due to the complexity of the tax system, only its main points can be summarized here. How do people pay taxes? How much tax do people pay? It is a very important topic in social management. Some taxes are administered by the Treasury Department, which is the federal tax. Local taxes are administered by each state. In addition to these two taxes, every family has to pay property tax if they have a house. In addition to these three, there is a sales tax, which anyone who buys something in a store also has to pay on most of the goods. This part of the tax is added to the price of the goods in the calculation, ranging from about 4 to 8%. This is the basic concept of paying tax. In terms of federal taxes, at the end of each year, the federal government tax department sends tax documents and forms. Everyone must fill out the forms in detail and return them along with the taxes due by April 15th. The documents and forms sent by the federal government are quite complicated. Citizens are required to report all their income, such as wages, stock dividends, remuneration, other income, etc. Can a citizen not report it? Generally, there is trouble, and on the other hand, it is illegal. Violation of tax laws can be serious enough to go to jail. Some people are careless and omit to report their income, which results in serious consequences. Because it is not clear at this point whether it is carelessness or intentionality. The government knows all about most of the income that citizens receive, salaries, fees, stock dividends, etc. The United States has a fairly developed computer system. Citizens each have a social security number, and individual companies and organizations enter this information into the government's computers when they pay. Thus, the government can check the computer to know whether the statement is true or not. Of course, there are many people who evade taxes, and many high-ranking officials have been involved in scandals in this area. A significant portion of federal and state taxes are already deducted directly when the typical hiring organization pays wages. This money does not meet with the citizen and goes directly to the federal and state government accounts. In addition, the employer also directly deducts the cost of Social Security, which is stored under the citizen's Social Security number for future retirement. So, when citizens get their paycheck, a significant amount of taxes have already been deducted. There are also various rules for citizens to fill out the forms, such as whether they are married or not, whether they have children, whether their parents are income dependent, etc. There are different rules for different categories. Each person has to fill in the details. There are also clear rules about what income is to be reported and what income is not to be reported, such as disabled veterans payments, employee disability payments, child benefits, gifts or other inherited property, compassionate payments, disaster compensation payments, partial scholarships, etc., which do not have to be reported, but money received from foundations, teaching, research, etc., salary income, profits from the sale of personal property, scholarships, and money received outside the United States must be reported. Failure to do so is illegal. There are detailed rules for all yearly income minus those that are exempt under the law, such as some income from retirement, some income from persons over 65 years of age, blind persons, children, etc. In addition, there are complex provisions concerning tax exemptions for investments, official office expenses, etc. Other than that, they are all taxable. Since the government takes a portion of the citizen's money in advance, the citizen must calculate whether the portion taken by the government is greater or less than the amount of tax that should be collected. In addition to the above, there are some medical and dental expenses, state and local taxes. There are agreements between governments, property taxes, interest paid by citizens, loans paid, 65% interest on personal income, grants, military payments, political contributions, societies, club fees, blood donations, etc. are not tax deductible. Some of the expenses needed for work are also tax-free, such as security facilities, gadgets, necessary clothing, protective clothing, medical examination fees, fees for professional organizations, subscription to professional publications, etc. After all of these items are clarified and calculated, the final total is the portion that is taxable by the federal government. In the handbook sent by the federal government, you can find out how much income should be taxed, and then compare it to the portion deducted in advance, and make up for the excess. How much tax the average family pays, we can look at. After deducting the various tax exemptions, the remaining amount of income has to be taxed, and there is a difference here between the four categories: single, married filing jointly, married filing separately, and head of household. The average annual income of the average American family after deducting all tax exemptions is between $30,000 and $50,000. We can look it up. The 1988 Standard. The table in question is found on page 133 of the attached PDF. As you can see from the above, federal taxes are quite high. It is thus clear why taxation has become a major issue in politics. In addition to federal taxes, there are state taxes, which are similar to the federal tax process. The state government sends documents and forms to each citizen, and the citizen declares the tax exemptions, including some medical and dental expenses, taxes paid, interest paid, donations, etc., which are roughly similar to those of the federal government, and then checks the table and finds that for an annual income of $29,950 to $30,000, the state tax is $1,837. Because the state tax is deducted in advance, it is also more than refundable. In addition to federal and state taxes, you also have to pay property taxes to your local government. In Iowa City, you pay about $1,000 per house, which is set by the local authorities after assessing the value of the house and is used by the city to build roads and maintain publicly owned facilities, such as libraries. Adding up the above three items, a married family with a taxable income of $30,000 pays more than $7,000 in taxes, or about a quarter of their total income. The tax system is fairly well developed and works well. The tax laws are quite tough, and tax evasion is punished to varying degrees depending on the severity of the situation. Americans have an important job each year, and that is dealing with taxes. People often have to keep a large number of documents and slips to prove part of their income that can be tax-free. There is a whole lot of paperwork for taxes in a year. Naturally, taxes are a core secret mainly because they reflect the true income of each family. Taxation is one of the central issues in American politics, as well as in the politics of capitalist countries. In socialist countries, there is no regular universal personal income tax system. Does the income tax system in Western countries have any social or political function? This is a question worth analyzing. At least Americans have a very clear idea. The money the government spends is the money they pay in taxes, so they generally expect the government to spend it in the right places and to pay attention to government policies and actions. Without the tax system, people would not care as much about government policies and ideas, because they would not be relevant to the individual even though they actually are. The tax system is one of the foundations of the Western political system. Everyone who gives a certain amount of money to the government feels a responsibility to monitor it. Government officials often have to explain their policies just to show that they are not spending taxpayer money frivolously, and voters pay more attention to elections because they have a vested interest in whom they elect, whether it is the president, senators, representatives, governors, state senators, state representatives, and local officials all have a direct stake in the interests of individual citizens. Through taxation, officials form a contract with the people. The tax system fosters a sense of responsibility, however passive it may be. In a society where people do not pay taxes, the government has to spend money too, just through different channels, but the people are much less accountable to the government. The tax system has another function, which is to organize the whole society. The tax department, through a sophisticated computer system, uses social security numbers to link individuals, organizations, and governments together in a tightly managed network. Individuals may not be controlled by anyone, but they are controlled by the tax authorities, a symbol of which is the need to report the core secrets of the family. That's why some say that tax officials are tougher than security officials. Part 6. Science and technology to rule people. The United States is a country where everyone reveres individualism, where individualism reigns supreme, and where no power has the right to interfere with it. Ask most people and you will get that impression. There are plenty of people who worry that individualism is too prevalent. People from other cultural milieus who have spent time with Americans can find their individualism, not all of it, to be obvious and sometimes difficult to accept. Given this assertion of the sanctity of individual liberty and the private domain, what is the force that organizes these 200 million or so people and brings them into every part of the greater machinery of society so that this society can function properly? There is a paradox here. The proper functioning of society, especially large societies, requires good collaboration and joint action by its members, and the values that people pursue are the primacy of the individual and the primacy of the private domain. There are various forces that coordinate this clock: the coordination of political systems, the coordination of laws, the coordination of stakes, the coordination of money, and so on and so forth. Among all kinds of coordination, there is one force that cannot be ignored, and that is science and technology. The development of science and technology acts in two directions. On the one hand, the high level of scientific and technological development requires a finer division of labor so that each person has his or her own clear task, which technically guarantees the value of individualism. Electronic automation allows each person to perform a specific job in his or her own specific position without the need to depend on others or to obey human orders. Only dependence on the machine and obedience to its commands. This is precisely one of the aspects of human alienation analyzed by Marcuse. Science and technology, especially high technology, to be applied to the specific production process must be broken down into countless links, each of which requires a person dedicated to it. Although it is a very small link, it is difficult to replace him without training. The more high-tech, the more so. Whereas in the 17th century, a single craftsman could manufacture a product from start to finish, today the situation has changed completely. This development of science and technology in general has raised the status of the individual, increased his self-awareness, and strengthened his sense of responsibility. Each individual has found a definite place in the big machine of society. In societies where technology is less developed or produced in the traditional way, the position of the individual in society is not very clear. Roles are interchangeable, and the possibility of chaos and instability in social organization is higher, mainly due to the interchangeability of roles. This has not only an economic but also a political meaning. As long as a significant portion of people in a society are not clear about their roles, that society may be in structural chaos. The development of science and technology also requires a tight organization. On the one hand, it is the transformation of science and technology into small links so that they can be operated, and on the other hand, these links must eventually be connected to form a whole. This is the most powerful organizational force of a society. It is outside the political and legal forces, but it is strong and powerful. Technology uses the logic of reason to persuade people to obey a strict rule. This process constrains the notion of individualistic supremacy. Imagine how many people are needed to work on a project like the space shuttle, and how many people are needed in its tightly organized system. Imagine how IBM organized each individual to serve. This kind of order is not a political order, but a technical order. As John Kenneth Galbraith said, it is the imperative of technology, process order. Today's human society has a peculiar phenomenon. It is more difficult to make people obey political and legal commands than to make them obey technological commands, 100 times more difficult. Everyone carefully studies the precautions before taking medicine, but far fewer people listen to politicians when it comes to abolishing racial discrimination and obeying a will. The degree of organization of society is generally higher in societies with high-tech development, while it tends to be less organized and less rationalized in low-tech or technologically less developed places. A large part of the function of the organization of American society is carried out by large companies and corporations that realize the logic of science and technology. In some less economically developed societies, strange phenomena can often be seen where the degree of organization is much higher than the general level of society in certain areas and places where high technology is realized. Scholars have also studied this issue. The famous economist Galbraith, in his book The New Industrial State, discusses his views. He argues that the widespread implementation of technology will lead to 6 results. 1. The use of technology will separate the beginning of any work from its final completion. 2. The capital used for production will increase. 3. Time and financial resources will be more fixed for the completion of specific work. 4. Technology requires specialized manpower. 5. Technology requires a high degree of organization. 6. Because of the use of time and financial resources, and because of the need for large organizations, society requires planning due to market conditions under high technology. So, Galbraith's concept is that the development and use of technology will inevitably lead to a more organized society. The economic and technical systems will be decided by professional managers who will control the whole system. Galbraith calls this the techno-structure. In the end stage of technological development, some people will automatically assume the function of managers, and they will be apolitical managers. But this management can largely reduce the burden of the political system. One of the functions of the political system is to coordinate human behavior, and society will be easy to govern if a mechanism can limit human behavior within the limits of rationalization. Another contemporary author, John Naisbitt, in Megatrends, The New Directions, Transforming Our Lives, depicts the same phenomenon but more human, more psychological, more physical. He uses the terms high-tech and high-touch to describe this process. He depicts the powerful power of technology to rule people as forced technology, the application of high technology that binds people more and more firmly to the technological process and alienates them. A rebellion against this power over man arose, a rebellion against electronic transfer technology and against electronic, automatic inquiry technology. Naisbitt attributes this to the fact that technology takes away the human touch and sense, so people have to rebel against it. In fact, a further layer can be added, that is, the rapid development of technology has made its own means of governing people highly sophisticated and may break through the general technical management and go to the inner world of each person, invading the private domain of people. In today's America, there is probably no power that can break through the barriers of individualistic beliefs and private spheres, but technology has this power. Technology guarantees material rewards, which is another condition. The fact that people aspire to high induction is a sign of rebellion against governance, and it just shows the power of technology to rule people. Technology to govern people is a completely unexpected result, and it can be said that the flowers are not planted intentionally and the willow will be planted inadvertently, whereas earlier advocates of the use of technology did not explicitly realize that they would become a means of managing people. Today, the application of technology has become one of society's most powerful means of managing people. To a large extent, American society is governed by technological processes. People obey technology more than they obey politics. Technological development has broken society into tiny, interconnected spheres, one for each individual. To enter a field requires special skills, and the educational system essentially operates around this goal. Thus, education is again incorporated into this governing process. Education constantly derives and develops the energy of technological governance and the culture of technological governance. The radicals criticize this phenomenon as alienation, which can be valid from a human point of view, but no society can do without science and technology, and the logic of science and technology is inevitable. Valuing science and technology, admiring it, applying it, it is obvious that this is not just a productive economic or purely technical issue. Therefore, while developing science and technology, I am afraid that the problem to think about is not that simple. Everything has good and bad. The key is to make a choice under what historical conditions and how to coordinate after the choice. Part 7. Dogs and cats are not free. A preceding part of this chapter was devoted to the issue of regulations in American society. Section 4 of this chapter, the culture of regulations. This is indeed a characteristic of American society. There are various reasons for the emergence of a regulatory society. As I analyzed in the section on regulatory culture, the harmonization of rules, of equality, and the high level of scientific and technological development are important conditions for the passage of regulations. On the other hand, in terms of national identity, I do not consider the American nation to be a moderate and uncontested people. On the surface, it is often easy to get the impression that this is the case. Most Americans are not loud and rowdy, and it is rare to see a fight in the streets or in the car. It's rare to see any heated arguments in the workplace either. In fact, these phenomena are the result of coordination under the regulations. Today, all kinds of regulations are quite developed, and there are clear regulations to coordinate all kinds of interests. The main reason why there are so many regulations is that society needs them. The reason why society needs them is that there are disputes over the things in question. If there is a dispute, there will be regulations. If there is no dispute, there is no need for regulations. Americans are by nature argumentative. Where regulations are unclear, arguments often occur. This character arises from a variety of reasons. One could argue that the development of the United States shows why this nature exists. Developing on a vast, unowned land where everyone can claim to be the owner of something and where there would be nothing if there were no arguments or no disputes. Westerners depict vivid stories of strife. In the light of modern developments, individualism is also prone to contention, and regulations reconcile not only conflict but also individualism. In this culture, it is natural for regulations to move toward systemization. and the regulations are often unclear in matters of collectivism. The Japanese tend to go to court rarely, unlike the Americans who go to court at every turn. As a result, various types of regulations have been developed to reconcile disputes. Most activities have regulations. There are regulations for building land, parking cars, plowing snow, raising children, and supporting the elderly. To illustrate the fineness of the regulations, let's look at a regulation governing domesticated animals. This regulation is in effect in one municipality. The statute begins by saying, "The law protects people and the law protects domesticated animals. While it is considered a personal right to keep domestic animals, some animals cause problems and must be regulated. Regulations are designed to make the public healthier and safer. Citizens should read these regulations and understand why you and your domesticated animals must comply with these laws." Here, animals seem to have equal rights with people. Many people keep animals in their homes, are regarded as equal members of the family. So, when the law is made, this feeling of the owner must be respected and not harmed. The following is a breakdown of this legislation. Rabies. All livestock, including cats over 6 months old, must be immunized against rabies, because wild animals can transmit this incurable disease to domestic animals. Rabies can be transmitted to humans, so the law protects both humans and domestic animals from this disease. Animal breeders must keep immunization certificates. Leashing animals. All dogs, regardless of size, must be leashed, except in the owner's own home and property. If the animal is outside without a leash, it is a violation of the law. If the animal is lost, the owner will be fined, and the animal will be impounded. License. All pets 6 months or older must be licensed by the municipality and must have a rabies vaccination certificate to apply for a license. License fees vary. Licenses must be applied for annually, and after March 1st of each year. Those who do not apply will pay an additional $15. All licenses expire on December 31st of each year. Fines. The animal control officer has the authority to confine and fine a stray animal. $10 for the first offense, $20 for the second, $30 for the third, $40 for the fourth, and so on for dogs. $5 for the first, $10 for the second, $15 for the third, $20 for the fourth, and so on for cats. If the owner does not come to claim the animal within 24 hours, an additional $8 per day for dogs and $5 for cats will be added. The owner must present a vaccination certificate and a license to claim the animal. After 4 days, the owner loses all rights to the animal and the animal is given up for adoption or euthanized. Every citizen has the right to claim a lost animal, and if anyone complains, the owner will have to go to court, where fines and penalties will be determined by a judge. If there is a violation, one can always call the reporting line to expose the wrongdoing of a particular animal. Other violations. This includes abandoning an animal in the city, allowing an animal to bark and disturb others, tethering an animal to a public facility in a public place, confining or tethering an animal in a place without suitable food or water, keeping an animal in a place that affects their health, allowing an animal to disturb others, etc. That's just the gist of this legislation. This legislation is much more detailed. The reason for such a statute to coordinate dogs and cats is also because of the different interests that exist. Americans, some love dogs and cats to death, and some hate them to death, so in order to reconcile the two, there must be regulations. I witnessed a family whose dog ran onto a neighbor's lawn to play, and the owner came out and yelled at them. The owner of the dog ran out and took the dog home. In this case, there is no regulation to coordinate the conflict. We can see that the law is very detailed. Each possible dispute is included. If there is a dispute, you can follow the rules. If there is no detailed legislation, I am afraid that the public will say that the public's opinion is reasonable. The mother will say that the mother's opinion is reasonable. The daughter-in-law will say that the daughter-in-law's opinion is reasonable. The son will say that the son's opinion is reasonable. With a little more discussion, one can feel that American society is not so free and not as free as one might think to do whatever one wants. Even dogs and cats are not free, and those who have cats and dogs are bound by them and, in my opinion, by choice. Although some people love dogs like life itself, and the dog and cat industry is thriving. Dog houses, dog cars, dog clothes, dog food, everything. But dogs and cats are very restricted. If dogs and cats had any sense, they would have gone to Washington to demonstrate and demand dog rights and cat rights. The more contentious a society is, the more coordination is often needed. Different coordination mechanisms can be chosen for different cultural climates. Regardless of the mechanism chosen, one thing that should always be kept in mind is the constant identification of potential areas of contention and the continuous development of coordination mechanisms. The various types of coordination can be broadly divided into two categories: humanized coordination and regulatory coordination. Regardless of the type of coordination, the important thing is to have the appropriate coordination mechanism for each type of potential dispute and to make it procedural in every place where a dispute occurs. Not only the specific dispute is resolved, but also a general coordination procedure is developed. In this way, society can increasingly move toward the development of orderly dispute resolution. A modern society is also a society that is free from disorderly dispute resolution. End of chapter 4.